I'm Michael McFadden. I'm a wildlife conservation officer here at Taronga Zoo, and my role is to look after a lot of the reptile and amphibian conservation programs. So a lot of species that are critically endangered or extinct in the wild, and manage those species programs so we can produce animals that can be released back to the wild. The Northern Corroboree Frog is one of Australia's most endangered species. It's a brightly yellow and black or greenish and black frog. It's only found in the mountainous regions of the Snowy Mountains of Australia, so in the ACT and the surrounding national parks, including Brindabella National Park and Kosciuszko National Park, and it's only about 3 centimetres in length, so it's a very small frog, but unfortunately it's critically endangered, mostly due to disease. The Northern Corroboree frog faces a number of threats in the wild. The most pressing of these is a disease called chytrid fungus, a disease that was introduced to Australia back in the 70s. It wiped out 6 species of Australian frog, and the Northern Corroboree frog is another species that's right on the brink due to this disease. Other threats they face include climate change. These days with extended droughts and bushfire seasons and extended flood and really wet La Nina seasons, unfortunately it doesn't play into the favour of the Northern Corroboree frog at all, and it results in very little of the eggs and tadpoles surviving to become little frogs. Other threats they face too include things like invasive species. It includes horses, deer, blackberry, which invades and chokes some of their breeding habitats. So there's a number of threats they face, but the primary threats are disease and climate change. To help the Northern Corroboree frog, here at Taronga Zoo we have a conservation breeding program. In the facility behind me, this large refrigerated quarantine facility, we have a population of about 600 Northern Corroboree frogs that are very closely genetically managed to make sure we really cover the genetic range of the species, and we breed them here at the zoo. We have quite a lot of success breeding this species. We produce them, tadpole tanks you can see right behind me here, where tadpoles are coming through at the moment. And then we rear those up either to be part of the conservation breeding program or to be utilised for reintroduction back to the wild. We have an active reintroduction program. For a number of years now, over a decade, we've been reintroducing the species and trialling a whole range of techniques, including releasing them at different ages, releasing them in different seasons, trying to fine tune and perfect the technique of being able to build populations in the wild. So not only do we have a conservation breeding program at the zoo where we're breeding them up for release, there's work happening in the wild to help save the species as well. That includes doing things like blackberry management around their habitat, reducing numbers of things like feral pigs around their habitat. But for this species, us being able to reintroduce them and for them to breed back in the wild is the key thing. And every year we go down and we monitor some of the populations. We work with some of our other partners who monitor some of the other populations, just to monitor population levels to work out roughly how many there are in each of the wild populations. We're also working with our research collaborators to look at, I guess, different aspects of being able to improve the species survival in the wild, including husbandry research to produce the strongest and most effective juveniles for release, and also looking at disease resistance, working with our partners, including the University of Melbourne, to see if we can look at producing frogs that are more resistant to the disease in the wild, so that long term, in 20 years' time, we may be able to release frogs that have a higher level of resistance and may be able to survive a lot better in the presence of the disease. Ever since I was a young kid, I absolutely loved reptiles and amphibians. Ever since I was maybe 3 or 4, I remember chasing after blue-tongued lizards and checking out bearded dragons in the wild, eastern water dragons, even red-bellied black snakes I absolutely loved. So ever since I was young, I kind of pursued that path. I was really passionate about wildlife, and then as I got a little bit older and learnt more about the threat species were facing and how endangered different species was, it kind of drove me to want to protect those species in the wild. So right throughout my primary school days and my secondary school days, I was passionate about that, reading everything I could about species, watching every documentary I could. I went on to do a zoology degree and then straight into conservation biology, working with species like the Northern Corroboree frog to effectively try to prevent their extinction in the wild.